morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for you all's welcome. We appreciate the hospitality. It has been nothing but great here in this great city of Chattanooga. Some of my favorite people live here. We've just been blessed and blown out of the building at the Reed House this morning by Miss Valerie Armstrong, former president of this great branch. Give her a round of applause. What I want to tell you is how grateful I am for you to be here, and I want to tell you how important this is and how important this work is, because democracy is on the ballot, guys. So I want you to promise me one thing, and I'm going to get out of the way and let Monroe Conlon introduce the moderator. I want you to commit, every one of you, to go back and contact 10 folks and ask them to contact 10 more folks so it keep on going, so we can find out what our status is. And I'm talking about our voter registration status, because our Secretary of State has already talked about how many folks they're going to purge this year. And remember, they can purge you if your name has changed, if your address has changed, if you've not voted. We used to say 4 years, but really if you've not voted in the last 3 years in either a general election or primary, you might get purged. So do that. Promise me that you would do that for me. I know that my moderator is going to do a fantastic job, but I'm asking them when it's time for questions, guys. Y'all know me. You ask a question. Don't get up and make a comment, because we are driven by time. We want to hear what our national folks got to say, and we want to hear what our community folks got to say. But if somebody else asks you a question, don't ask. Thank you all.
I am absolutely delighted to be here this morning, but more than that, I am extremely pleased to see you, because you are the key to the issues that are going to be talked about today. My honor and pleasure to introduce and present the moderator for today's session, Ms. Tanae Franklin, the health chair of the Tennessee State Conference. Tanae is a person who is prepared, equipped, and more than capable of bringing it to you and getting it done. And so it's my honor and privilege to present the moderator of this morning's session, Ms. Tanae Franklin, the health chair of the Tennessee State Conference, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Tanae?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Woods, for the introduction. This is truly family. It's good to be back home in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My name is Tanae Hamilton Franklin, and Dolly Hamilton is my daughter, as my mother. I'm her daughter. So I know some of you might know her. But yes, so we're here to talk about Project 2025. And the reason that we need to have these conversations all over the country, and most importantly, start this conversation in our communities and continue it in the Chattanooga communities, because it is a lot. It's a lot to get through. So we're going to start that process by hearing from our panelists today. I know that we will not be able to answer every single question, but we have a wealth of knowledge at the table, and we are committed to making sure that this is an ongoing dialogue that we have within the NAACP and also within our local communities. So let's get started. First, we have Ms. Phaedra Jackson, who is the NAACP National Campaigns Director. We also have Mr. Ray Curry, Procurement Officer of the NAACP National Office, and also Reverend Dr. Charlotte Williams, who is a pastor of the Bethlehem Wiley United Methodist Church and Eastdale Village Community United Methodist Church. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, say a little bit more about themselves. When I say briefly, I'm talking about maybe 15 seconds, because we're going to focus our time on the conversation today. Ms. Jackson?
Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. Again, my name is Phaedra Jackson. Slight title change. I am now the Vice President of Unit Advocacy and Effectiveness, so I'm excited to work with you all. What that means is I get to work with our wonderful members on the advocacy work that you do in alignment with our campaigns department. And I've been with the NAACP going on 4 years, and I'm just really excited to be here in Tennessee and talk about this very important issue today.
Good morning. I'm Ray Curry. I am in a new role as the Executive Procurement Officer for the NAACP National Office, but I am in a previous role in this area, familiar with a lot of faces in the room today, having served as a Regional Director for United Auto Workers in this region, also a member of the Murfreesboro branch this year. I said I was folks that are present this morning, and also have served as the International President for United Auto Workers also. So I'm glad to be here with you in this space, and thank you all for your commitment, because I'm looking at this room, it's 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, and I know that you can find some other things, but it tells me that you're committed to the work and in this space and the things that are needed as we move forward. Thank you.
Good morning and grand rising. I am Reverend Dr. Charlotte Shynellen Nzinga Inyaboki Williams, and I am a revolutionary. I come to you as Senior Pastor of Eastdale Village Community United Methodist Church, as well as Bethlehem Wiley United Methodist Church. I am co-chair of the Unity Group, as well as board chair of Caleb. I'm also a radio host, a radio person on The Butt Naked Truth with WNRO 1260 AM. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm standing in the gaps on behalf of our ancestors who have fought for this day. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to get started by Ms. Phaedra Wilson is going to give us an overview. I believe you have a PowerPoint presentation, and if you'd like to come to the podium. Okay. And when ready, we can get that PowerPoint presentation started.
All right, thank you so much. So I was asked to bring some kind of foundational understanding of Project 2025. And so in the course of the next 10 or so minutes, I really just want to identify the threats that are Project 2025, especially from the lens of the NAACP, right? We're tracking, it's a 900-page document, so the threats are plentiful. But we will stick to a few specific issue areas that align with the work that we're doing at the NAACP. So if we can bring the deck back up and go to the next slide, 2 slides. All right, so our President and CEO, Derek Johnson, has been quoted as saying, "We are not partisan, but we're political as HE double hockey sticks." And we know that this is a fight we must take on. And I want to lean into that because, I also lead the research at the NAACP, and one thing we can say is that Black folks, the political is innate, right? Our existence is political, and so we must fight. And to fight, we must organize, and to organize, we must be educated. And so the goal here, if we can go to the next slide, is to really talk about the policy attacks that are coming forth to us through Project 2025. Raise your hand if you're unfamiliar with Project 2025. Right, it's pervasive. At this point, you probably have to be under a rock not to know about Project 2025. But again, like I said before, it's a 900-page document. So even I don't know everything that's in there, but I know that there are attacks on every part of our community in that document, and we must be aware of them, and we must start to fight back. So in this conversation, I want to go over the origin of Project 2025, talk a little bit about some of the folks that are behind it, and then look at the high-level impacts to our community. Next slide. I won't read all of this to you all, but what I do want to point out is that Project 2025, the threats relate to gender, sexuality, race, and aim to end most of all of the federal government's efforts to achieve equity and even collect data that could be used to track outcomes across the public and private sectors. Y'all, they are not playing around. They want to come for you. They want to come for us, and they want to gaslight gaslight us. They want to take away the ability to track the data and then say it didn't happen, right? And so if you read it on its face and what they say it's about, it doesn't sound that bad, right? They want to restore the family as a centerpiece of American life and protect our children. Who is ours, right? Because our children aren't getting educated. If you're taking education away from our children, you are not protecting them. They want to dismantle the administrative state and return to self-governance to the American people. We saw what self-governance looks like, right? We saw that on January 6th when people ran to the Capitol. We do not need that. They want to defend our national sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. Where are those global threats? We saw that, right? We see what they're doing in Springfield, Ohio right now, talking about those global threats, which are people in their lowest point in their lives looking to us for help, and they are demonizing them, right? And then finally, they want to secure our God-given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty. How many of us get to walk around freely in this country right now? Who are they fighting for? So I just want you all to keep that center as we have this conversation. The question is, who are they fighting for? Who are they protecting? And see if you see yourself in this conversation. Next slide. So the 4 issue areas that we're going to drill down in are our civil rights, the economy, education, and healthcare. When we think about, next slide, when we think about our civil rights, we know that the road to civil rights and the road to human rights has been a long one, right? My colleague Jamal Watkins loves to talk about this slide because he talks about the trajectory of our road to rights. And he goes back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was a milestone in the history of human and civil rights back in December of 1948. Folks came together and they declared that there are a set of rights that we should all have, and they should not be taken away. Things like having time off, right? Having time with your family, having access to clean water and food, right? And so when we think about these attacks, we want to make sure that we are remembering that the road that we're on is a long one, and we've been fighting for a long time, and we cannot allow folks to take us back. Next slide. So when you think about Project 2025, you kind of have to stop and think, how do you get such a comprehensive document? How do they hit every facet of our lives, right? Well, they're organized. Project 2025 is more than 50 and growing of the nation's leading conservative organizations joining forces to prepare and seize the day. The axiom goes, personal policy, and we need a new personnel is policy, and we need a new generation of Americans to answer the call. Now, when you say personnel is policy, you're like, well, what does that mean? That means that Project 2025 is a blueprint to bring in folks into our government at every single level from the federal government to make sure that this agenda is successful. So the next time we have a conservative president, they will have marching orders. Right now, we have stopgaps. We have hurdles. We have people who are like, no, that's not the law. That's not how things should go. Should this Project 2025 go forward? Should we have a new conservative presidency? Their goal is to remove all those stopgaps, to remove all those barriers, and to allow them to move forward with their conservative agenda. And that is why we must organize, that is why we must inform ourselves, and that is why we must fight. Next slide. So our major civil and human rights concerns with Project 2025. Again, they are attacking our Black and progressive government workers. Black workers are overrepresented in the federal government, right? So we are a large percentage of the workforce, and when they come to wipe us out and to replace with their conservative workers, that means that our communities will suffer, right? That's money taken out of our communities. That's money taken out of our pockets, and those are people that are now unemployed. But don't forget, they also want to take away social services. So you're unemployed and you don't have a way to get unemployment. And so the fundamental principle guiding the project is a plan to embed conservative-minded political appointees throughout the federal government. These are, quite frankly, yes men. They are prioritizing fighting racism, hear me now, racism against white Americans. Both Trump's Agenda 47 and Project 2025 plans to vow to get rid of anti-white indoctrination, affirmative action, diversity, equity, inclusion, especially the dreaded critical race theory. Now, these are all things that we have fought years to gain, to make sure that folks are educated, that we have fair access, and they are dismantling it. We don't have to wait for Project 2025. decision that dismantled a portion of affirmative action. If they got it there, they're not going to stop. They also have a plan to stop talking about race and stop collecting data. I told y'all they want to gaslight us. So if you don't collect information, then you can't prove it happened. And so if you don't have the data on how many folks are being abused by the police, if you don't have the data on Black maternal poor health outcomes, then you can't say that there is a problem, right? So we have to make sure that we are keeping these systems in place and these safeguards. And then finally, the plan is to protect law enforcement above enforcing the law equally. They plan to stop the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division from investigating voter suppression and election interference. And we already know that that's coming. Not only is it coming, it's here. They're purging us from the rolls. They're changing voting locations. They will do anything they can to make sure that we can't vote, which is why not only do we have to educate ourselves on Project 2025, we have to educate ourselves on our voting process. We have to register, we have to make sure we're on the rolls, and we have to make sure we're showing up to vote. All right, so let's quickly talk about threats to our economy. Next slide. I'll go through these somewhat quickly because I want to get to the panel, but I want to make sure you all hear some of these threats. We've got threats to the Department of Housing and Urban Renewal. This would repeal the AFFH, or the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. A lot of acronyms, but basically all of the policies that have been put in place to make things more equal, to make things more fair, they said, no, we don't need those. We've done what we're supposed to do. You've got access. Now, I don't know about you all, but I had a very hard time buying a house. And a lot of people do. Redlining is still a thing in the state of California. They just call it something else, right? So we have to make sure that these protections are protected. The Department of Labor and related agencies. I know my colleague, Mr. Ray Curtis, is going to talk a little bit about that, but there are attacks on every aspect of our working lives. They want to revise the DEI revolution in the labor policy, eliminate racial classifications and CRT trainings, eliminate the OFCCP, or the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. These are the folks who make sure employers doing business with the federal government comply with non-discrimination regulations, right? The Small Business Administration. They want to end the SBA direct lending. This is what gets our community going. As a small business, you need funds to start your business. If you get rid of those programs, we are disadvantaged. We already have less capital coming into our community, and when you get rid of programs like that, you take us further than back to ground zero, right? You're putting us underneath the table, and we just can't have that happen. And then finally, there are attacks on financial and regulatory agencies, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They want to repeal Dodd-Frank Section 1071 and redefine deceptive, unfair, and abuse practices. This comes through an attacks on the Department of Commerce, Treasury, the Export-Import Bank, the Federal Reserve, and the FTC, or the Federal Trade Commission. Next slide. Okay. Education. We in the Black community know that education is near and dear to us. It's important because it is the foundation for everything else we can do in life. If you can't get a good education, it's really hard to get a good job. If you can't get a good job, it's really hard to take care of your family, to buy a house, to buy food, to buy gas, right? And so education is foundational. And the threats to education are also quite shocking. They want to eliminate the Department of Education. They are calling for federal education policy to be limited, including the elimination of the Department of Ed, resulting in transferring control of education policies to states. I'm from Texas. I'm from the biggest school district in Texas, which is Houston, where you've seen the state take control of that school district, right? That should not be happening. And we don't want this to be the law of the land. There are also threats to impacts on HBCU funding. We've currently seen a lot of funding flow into our colleges and universities, but we know that those can all dry up at the change of administration and under something like Project 2025. They want to take funding away from public schools, institute a Parents' Bill of Rights. We've seen what those Parents' Bill of Rights look like in Florida, right? We've seen where parents have gotten books banned that students should be learning. We've seen where parents can object, and all of a sudden our history can't be taught in schools because it's threatening, right? And so we have to know that these threats, they're not just coming, they're here, but they're coming on a larger scale if we don't stop it now. And then, reduced emphasis on DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and education, and student loan forgiveness programs. Project 2025 seeks to end the Biden-era loan programs through phasing out all existing programs. Next slide. So we know that every bit of progress that we've made, you can think about any progress we've made in our country for Black folks, and it's being pushed back in Project 2025. When it comes to our health, there's a direct assault on health equity. It cuts access to health care, lowers quality of care, and provokes food insecurity and hunger. These are calculated attacks on reproductive justice. They shrink the social safety net. So think about folks who need Medicaid. It cuts federal funding for states. It places time limits on lifetime caps to Medicaid coverage. We saw at the time the lifetime caps go away as we got the Affordable Health Care Act, right? So we're just reverting back. Everything they're doing is taking us back. Going to the next slide, I just want to make sure that we'll talk about the call to action, but we want you to know that this is a lot of information, and you don't have to digest it all now. The NAACP has put resources together for you. So if you go to naacp.org, we've got policy positions. There's a toolkit that has sample language and graphics that you can share and make your community aware. There's talking points, and there's just a digital home for you to get more information. So I'd encourage you to continue to inform yourself. I gave you a small bit of a very large document that is a coordinated attack on our community, and I would encourage you to continue to dig and continue to fight back, because we cannot, I repeat, we cannot let Project 2025 go forward.
I thought you said you were an expert. Thank you, Phaedra. Is it okay if we use first names? Okay, all right. Charlotte, Ray, Phaedra, Tanae. Okay, so this is going to be a dialogue. But before I get started, as Phaedra was talking, I was flipping through my notes, and I wanted to remind us of the fact that Project 2025 has already started. And here in Tennessee, an example of that is Tennessee rejecting federal HIV funds and funding it through United Way. And this is more like a pilot, right? So you already know that Trump appointed 250 judges, lifetime judges, so it's already here. And one thing I was reminded of a couple of weeks ago is that even if we have a presidential election that results in a candidate that reflects our values, this is still not going to go away. It's going to be pervasive in the states. And so this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. Let's go ahead and start with Ray. You get the first question. How will Project 2025 impact a living wage?
There's a lot of discussion on the number of agencies actually going away under Project 2025. Wage and hours revision, which culminates a piece each and every day of how wages are paid out, minimum wages across the country, and certain states actually that have their own set minimum wage, and cities that have put minimum wages in place. Under Project 2025, discretionary methods would be used by eliminating the authority of the Secretary of Labor. Secretary of Labor, Wage and Hours Division, National Labor Relations Act, and all those provisions actually cover that space. And when you start talking about the ability to have time and a half pay right now, currently over 40 hours when you work during the week. Under provisions of Project 2025, a corporation or an entity would have the ability to determine how that compensation would take place. Meaning, if you work 60 or 70 hours, they may determine that hours that are above 40, the 20 or the 10 or the others, may wind up being your following weeks of compensation. Meaning that you may find yourself actually at home during that same time period, but being compensated for the hours, but not paid at a time and a half rate. That's part of the biggest part of the impact when you start talking about that. And a lot of us, when you look at what happens with regard to overtime compensation, that overtime compensation is economic empowerment for none of us out there. That makes a difference in start talking about that type of adjustment happening federally, even the recent announcement that just happened in California, going to a living wage by 2025 at $25 an hour, that could be impacted because then the federal standards and state standards can actually be eroded by executive order. Yeah. And a number of these pieces that are significant, when you start talking about this 925-page document that's there, a number of these items, because the conversation's already begun, they can be discussed in executive order and rolled out, not within the first 120 days, but in the first 24 to 48 hours of administration change. So when we always talk about the difference between the ballot box and your actual income, your home, your wallet, the impact of that wallet and your ability to spend and other pieces could change by the impact of a vote on November 5th and other votes that would take place. But the living wage piece is a piece that would impact a number of us immediately who are non-salaried individuals and who are dependent upon an hourly rate and dependent upon the hourly rate actually increasing each year. Employers also, as a result of this change that could be happening prior to 2025, also could determine that they're going to start having market rates for wages. Meaning, your current rate may be too high for the current city and the current state and community that you live in. That rate could have actually been adjusted to a standard based on other employers that were in the area, and you actually were the benefactor of a higher wage rate because of another company or another organization's pay. That rate could actually be lowered. And prior to 2025 would give executive order authority for employers to make those type of decisions. So it could be a very huge impact, and again, as a reminder about what's actually taking place in real time.
Thank you. So you just reminded me of something, Ray. That last statement that you made about employers being able to adjust the salary down. And so for young people who are starting to think about getting out in the workforce, you might work from home because we have this remote workspace, right? So you might be living in California, where it's a higher rate of living, and you receive a job from a nonprofit organization in Tennessee who's willing to pay you that California wage. But no, what they're saying is that even though you're living in California, you're still going to be paid that Tennessee wage. And so that's going to completely turn you upside down. So that's a great example. Ray, I was wondering if you can still go on and talk to us about, you have a labor background, so talk to us about the labor movement particularly and labor jobs. I know we hear about that in the news from time to time, but could you give us a more in-depth understanding of what's going on with regards to labor?
Well, labor always had this belief, and it goes back to a former UAW president, actually, Walter Reuther, and that was the bread box and the ballot box go hand in hand. Yeah. And a number of you may be a little bit younger, and I am a little bit older now, but I know what the bread box is, and those of you may not know what a bread box is. It's the traditional box that was out of wood, or out of steel, or out of aluminum that sat on your counter. Yeah. Now, often, if you could afford the loaf, that you had the bread to be able to purchase and place inside of that. Yeah. Your ability to purchase that bread is your economic empowerment piece, and that's the piece where we say that they're both hand in hand. Yeah. Labor is actually affected in a number of ways in this process. While labor has been able to bring up a number of different communities, always not that the organization that was next to them actually was represented by a union, but it empowered that union. Yeah. Space that happens here, recently what's taking place in Chattanooga, what's happened in other related suppliers that have come as manufacturing has grown inside of this state and other states. The significant piece is organized labor has driven wages downstream. And when I say downstream, not dropping wages, actually impacting wages that are downstream. Related suppliers, nearby companies who prefer not to be organized have actually increased the wage rates for their employees as a result of an effort to not organize, not unionize, but to empower their workers and give them a voice and give them public unions. Firefighters are public unions. Police officers are members of public unions. In this space, public unions actually can be eliminated. TSA folks, for those of you who fly, and you see the nice TSA agent who's making sure that things are secure post 9/11, which we just also had an anniversary date on this past Wednesday. That agency could be privatized. There's been a number of efforts to make that agency privatized, but it would be a huge onslaught as part of what 2025 has stated to privatize that agency. Our union members who are also in the government agencies, Department of Justice, something Phaedra has mentioned with regard to investigations on wrongful terminations, wrongful charges, wrongful acts during voting. If those staff agencies are eliminated, no longer unionized, those who are directing their traffic and voice and message completely change each and every day in that space. Homeland Security, a number of agencies could be eliminated. And a number of us, like myself, I am a former Army veteran, and I know that there are those who have served in this room. The Veterans Administration is also a member of AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees International Union. They would be the first to be eliminated. And those of you who still work in government agencies and have government standards, the GS scale, under Project 2025, there would no longer be a GS scale. The impact of what you worked for, what you sacrificed in time, and your commitment for the civil service rights would be further impacted. So unionization, as we know, would no longer exist. 2025 would erode any efforts for card checks. And those of you who are not familiar with card checks, that is when an employer makes a determination that they believe that they have a good understanding of where their workforce wants to be represented, and they are voluntarily willing to recognize union standing inside of that workspace. Project 2025 eliminates the ability to have card checks. Project 2025, as Phaedra also mentioned to you, about the ability to capture any of this information about discrimination, wrongful things that have happened to you, while that's no longer being undocumented under 2025, you have no EEOC to go file a claim. You have no path or rights with a grievance procedure that would take you to arbitration. All of these entities would be eliminated under what we know as traditional peace. The biggest part out of this that was very shocking even to labor scholars is that Project 2025 and its overriding executive authority, while a location could have a collective bargaining agreement with an employer that may be lasting anywhere from 3 years or to 5 years, Project 2025 gives that employee the right to terminate the collective bargaining agreement and establish that there are new standards that should be put in place because the economy, the market, the conditions, their current products, or performance have all changed, so they need to reset that marketplace. They need to change because of benefits. They need to change because of the ability that federal government standards have changed. And there's always a linchpin in all collective bargaining agreements that talk about the ability for changes when federal statutes or state statutes are otherwise impacted and they conflict with the collective bargaining agreement. And if that happens, Phaedra mentioned to you already about the Affordable Care Act. We've already heard of 46 minus 1. Now, would like to be 46 plus 1 in the future, and another role, and he's made it real clear that he would like to change the Affordable Care Act. If the Affordable Care Act goes away, think about what happens for those who have that collective bargaining provision with health care. Think about what happens when physicians fought for many years, and this was taken out of the Affordable Care Act, which was pre-existing health care. Right. So all of those are key pieces for labor and big impacts on what can happen even for a location that had an electric bargaining agreement.
Thank you, Grant. That's a lot of information. And I do have a follow-up question maybe a little bit later. Charlotte, we're coming to you next. But before we get that, I neglected to let everyone know, we did have on the schedule Miss London Haynes, who's the Vice President of the Youth and College Division from West Tennessee. At the last minute, she couldn't be here because she had an illness in her family. But nevertheless, we have a lot of young people here. If you are a member of the Youth and College Division, would you please stand up? And if you have someone in your family who is college age or younger, would you please stand up or raise your hand? And I want the youth and college to keep standing. So if you have in your family someone that is college age or younger, raise your hand. All right. So while the 2025, you can put your hands down and you all can have a seat. Thank you. So this is a reminder that even though this has already started and the pressure is going to be going on, it's going to be our young people that are going to have to bear the brunt. So I'm very appreciative that you all are here because we need your ideas and your strategies in order to help make a change. But that being said, Charlotte, I'd like us to turn to the faith community. From your perspective, where is the faith community right now in terms of understanding the impact, the seriousness of the impact, and the desire to engage in this conversation?
Thank you for that question. I think that the faith community knows that this is a matter of life and death. And that the faith community also knows that it's not just about saving souls, but also saving bodies. And we're also able to come to the form of seeing that they're coming for us. They're coming for our people. And what I mean by that is that everything that we have done, prayed for, and asked for, and fought for, they are coming to take away. And so what we're going to have to do as a faith community is organize and able to see that it's not just about sitting in the pews, but we're going to have to take the church to the streets. And church in the streets means that we're going to have to knock on doors, and we're going to have to let people know that you can be both Christian as well as being political, because that's who Jesus Christ was. Jesus was a political prisoner. He fought against the law. He was executed by the Roman Empire. So we have to be able to see that there is a bridge between the law and the church. I know there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, but people of African descent, we don't have that luxury. Because it was illegal for black people to be free. But the word says, whoever the Son sets free is free indeed. Yeah. It was illegal for black people to learn how to read and write. But we said that if we're going to get the word, we're going to have to learn how to read and write. And it was through the church that a lot of our historically black colleges and universities were birthed. Today we know that there is banning on the books, so we're going to have to be revolutionary and say whatever books that they ban, those are the ones that we need to read. Yes. We know that affirmative action is under attack, and we need to put names and faces to people. The person that wrote or came up against the affirmative action is by the name of Edward Bloom, B-L-U-M. I encourage you to look him up. As well as, Project 25, it comes out of the birth of the Heritage Foundation. I recommend that you find out their history as well. We also need to recognize that those that come in after us are very well organized. They already have at least 160 organizations and a $22 million budget that is coming after us. And I say that we can still be encouraged, because the same God that brought us from enslavement is the same God that is with us today. Yes. The same God that gave us the hands to build the pyramids is the same God that helped us to build the White House. And so with that being said, the faith community is going to have to catch on fire and be the one that leads and stop being the tailgate and be the headlight. The faith community is going to have to get some Backbone, absolutely. I was thinking of something else, but thank you.
Charlotte, let me ask you this. So my minister last week, he said the church, our congregation is not a political organization, and he said, but we better get out and vote. So, but not everyone is like that. So for those faith leaders who might have apathy with regards to voter engagement, what are some strategies that we can think about to change that framework?
I mean, all we have to do is look at Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King as well as the Civil Rights Movement. It was birthed out of the Black church. Dr. King and all those that were a part of the Civil Rights Movement met in the church first and then went to the streets. For again, as us as African descent, or those who identify as African, it was always the church or the soul, as W.B. Du Bois, who is the founder of the NAACP, is the soul of Black folk. So the soul of Black folk, it was in those hunt harbors that we had to organize in order to get our freedom either on earth or in heaven, one way or the other. So I would tell those ministers that if you're saying that you would have followed Harriet Tubman or you would have followed Dr. King, if you're not doing what they did today, you would have done it then. So don't use the church as an excuse of not getting involved because you're not following that mandate. That's not who Jesus was. Jesus says, I come to set the captives free. Yes. So if you're following the word, then that should not be an issue. Because if we are not just going to go by the souls of Black people and not the bodies, then I say that you're hypocritical and you should get out the pulpit. Right.
I've got another question for you, Charlotte. Pedro and I were driving over here, and she's like, there's a lot of churches on East 3rd Street alone, right? So there's a church almost every corner in Nashville and Chattanooga alike. So let me ask you this. How can I phrase it? I'm just going to come out and say it. Yeah. So we know, or at least I grew up learning and observing that 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in the week, right? So we're all in this together. I also know that there are other ministers that might identify as a different race, and they are also preaching the word. But I don't know if they don't necessarily have the same lived experience that we do. So how do we sort of bridge the gap and engage in dialogue across faith leaders from diverse lived experiences?
Well, thank you. That's a very excellent question, and I want to remind our people that the Black church began because of racism. It was the Black church had to be created because we were not welcomed in the white churches. So I know my EME people are in the house that can testify to that. Yes. So I would say that in order for us to come together across walks of life, I would recommend the book by Jim Wallace that is entitled America's Original Sin. And in that book, he basically comes to the question, if we're talking about making America, should America be great again or should it be born again? Yes. Because if you're talking about racism is the original sin, we have not dealt with that. And so to come across the board with those that are of our white brothers and sisters, they're going to have to come to the reality and face the truth that DEI should not be words of defiance, but should be actions of call. Yes. So if we're talking about these kinds of things in the church, I will also let whites know that, you know, a lot of whites are more white than they are Christian. And in order to be born again, then you're going to have to become more Christian than you are white. And so going across the board for other faiths, I would say the same thing, that everyone is going to have to face the ugliness, the truth of the reality that racism still exists. That this is a racist country that was built on racism. In order to change that, you can't change anything if you're not willing to confront it. It is racist. And if you want to change it, then you're going to have to make those confessions. Confess your sins, repent, humble yourselves, and turn from your wicked ways.
Would you please help us understand how the branches across the country are going to stay connected regarding Project 2025?
Yeah, so as we wrap, the National wants to be a resource for our branches as you are fighting against Project 2025. So we have a starter. It's a very large document and there's a lot of nuance, but we have a lot of information for you and a lot of tools for you to be able to spread the word and share the information. But we want to continue to be a resource. So if there's something missing, if there's some nuance, if there's some research you need, definitely work with your state conferences, but the state conferences can work with national to make sure you all have what you need. Because we don't know what you need until you tell us. But the big thing is we've got to have a repository and a learning space of how we're all fighting back against this. It is not an easy battlefield, but collectively, that's the only thing that's ever brought us over. So my challenge to you is to articulate what you need from the national, continue the fight, and together we can win.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, Ray Curry, Phaedra, one of my favorite people, moderator Tanae. Thank you, 3rd Baptist, now 2nd Baptist on 3rd Street. Thank you for allowing me to read what's in my hand, for hosting us. Thank every one of you for coming. I encourage you, that's Harold Carter, I'm trying to make them be Lawrence Armstrong. But you got work to do. You know how you get a work assignment when you really go to a workshop or something? You got an assignment. I said it before, let me say it again. Your assignment is to get on your phone, get on your cell phone, get on your social media platform, contact 10 folks that you feel like do not know what you did know, that are not registered to vote, and ask them to contact 10 folks to get them registered to vote. Our pastor the other night said, when we were at Orchard Knob, he said something. He said, we can't sit this one out. We can't sit this one out. You must go vote early. I talked about early, and I'll keep saying, check your registration status. Ask the folks that you are going to contact to check their registration status. Our Secretary of State already told us he was going to purge thousands of votes. They're not kidding. Your polling places are not in the same place. So make sure before October 7th that you have checked your status and you know that you can vote. And then beginning when is October 16th? Is that October 16th? Go vote early, guys. Vote early. I'm challenging all faith groups, all churches, mosques, synagogues. Use your transportation method. Use your vans, your cars, etc., and take folks to the polls. If this happens, it's on our watch, guys. If this happens, it's against these babies. You understand? A lot of you not old as me, and some of you older than me. You just don't tell it. But we don't have as long to endure in it. But I want to make sure I left it right for them. We cannot allow this to happen on our watch.